Hello, and welcome to the next interview in our Publish with Purpose series, where we interview authors we know who have been very intentional about their writing and their work's purpose. I'm Tara Alamani, the founder of Emerald Lake Books, and today we are talking with Beth Gibbs. Beth has 4 books out. She is the author of a children's book called Ogie Bogie, the Elephant Yogi, and then she's published 3 works with us, which include Enlighten Up, Soul Food, and Bitchcraft. Welcome, Beth. It's nice to have you here today.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
It's always been so much fun working with you, so I'm really looking forward to this interview today. So let's
Me
get
too.
started with having you introduce yourself and telling us a bit about your writing, about your books.
Okay. Well, name is Beth Gibbs. You know that already. And I have been actually writing since I was 12 years old, but I did not think of myself as a writer. It was mostly poems, snippets, and things. And after my last move, I found boxes of stuff that I had written, snippets and notes and so forth. And then I also retired from my salaried job as the head of a nonprofit. And I thought, well, I need to do something with my time. So I was at my job was executive director of a summer camp for kids, a nonprofit. And because I'm a yoga teacher, of course, I started a yoga program for the kids. And that's how Ogie Bogie came into being, because the kids would tell us as teachers how yoga was helping them feel better, dealing with their families, and how it was just like a respite from their lives. So that's how the writing journey got started. And that was self-published. So that kind of set that whole thing off, and it aligned really nicely with what I was doing with my yoga classes, because it was all about self-awareness and really understanding why we do things in the way that we do, so that we can make conscious choices to change, or just kind of say, okay, I'm not going to change and I'll deal with the consequences. And sometimes there are situations we find ourselves in where there's no choice. So we just have to find peace of mind. So all that kind of just slotted in together. And then came Enlighten Up. And then I used those same self-awareness techniques in Soul Food, which was a fiction book. And then that kind of led to Bitchcraft, which is the latest book. And those last 3 I mentioned, of course, I've done with Emerald Lake Books, hybrid publisher.
And one of the things I found really interesting about your writing journey is just that you haven't pigeonholed yourself into a specific genre. Oftentimes, I know for myself, I have 7 books. All of them are nonfiction because
Mhm.
that's my comfort zone. I love the
Mhm.
fact that you have always stretched yourself from, children's book to fiction to nonfiction. It's just all of it is open territory for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I don't want to pigeonhole myself. It's like I think of this, I sort of think of it as I have this universal muse somewhere out there, and it gives me ideas, and I have to flow with them, because if I don't flow with what sort of pops into my consciousness, it goes somewhere else. And I don't like to give things away without purpose, so to speak. So
Which aligns very well with our whole Publish with
yes,
Purpose.
it does. Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
So when talking about Bitchcraft specifically, what prompted you to write that book?
Well, it was interesting because the first book I did with you with Emerald Lake Books was Enlighten Up. And in that book, there was one chapter where I wanted to really talk about what it meant to be a self-aware, assertive woman. And I was going to title that chapter, The Bitch Has a Voice. And that was because I had gone to the library and I had seen 2 books which inspired me. One was The Bitch in the House, and the other one was The Bitch is Back. And they were both essays of women who sort of came into their own. So that's how I came up with The Bitch Has a Voice. But then I was having a birthday celebration with my son, and this really surprised me. And I was telling him about it, and he said, why don't you call it Bitchcraft? And I said, uh, what do you mean? And he said, well, if you're going to be a good bitch in any form or fashion, it requires skill. So that's a craft. And I thought, so I titled that chapter that. And then when the book came out, a lot of the responses I got from people was, I just love that chapter. I just love that title. And so a couple years after that, I've been thinking about it and I thought, well, so many people said they really enjoyed that chapter. Why don't I write a book titled Bitchcraft? So I got started. And in the early stages, I would take pieces of it to my writing group, which is very diverse, men, women, old, young, gay, straight, whatever. And the men would, because I like to put humor in whatever I do. So I would read parts of it and the men would laugh. And so I thought, okay, this isn't just for women, it's for anybody. And basically, that I was targeting it to people who feel ignored, othered, betrayed, lied to, looked down upon, people who weren't ever able to sort of own their own power and be who they are because they were getting so much blowback from people who said, you can't be who you are. We don't like it. So that's kind of how the whole thing came about and expanded. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that when we were working on Enlighten Up and you first brought the chapter, because I don't swear, it was like it really made it very hard for me to talk
Hmm.
through the chapter, but it has a lot of really engaging and interesting and thought-provoking things. And I think
Hmm.
one of the things that really comes out of the self-awareness is not just being self-aware and learning how to be responsible and assertive, but
Hmm.
also accepting personal responsibility. And I think
Absolutely.
there's this whole aspect of, so often we say we can't be such and such because of so and so, or
Hmm.
this and that. And the whole thing with Bitchcraft really is about embracing who you are
Yes.
and learning how to be assertive. That doesn't necessarily mean being aggressive. I think a lot of people mix
Absolutely. There's a
those terms
huge
together.
difference between, yeah, there's a huge difference between the definitions of those terms
Mhm.
because often people who have learned to be assertive recognize that there is responsibility that comes along with that. And people who sometimes are aggressive probably aren't thinking about that at all. So that's why it's a consciousness kind of thing.
Mhm.
If you have to stand up for yourself in any situation, you have to really understand what that situation is, what's your part in it, and then you choose how you are going to respond or not respond, because there are some situations in which people find themselves, which if they responded in any way, with action or behavior, they might put themselves in more danger or more harm. But as long as it's a conscious choice not to act, and if you do act, you act responsibly and appropriately. So that's really the basic message that I was trying to make.
Well, I think you did a wonderful job with it. So,
Thank
so
you.
tell me, who is your ideal reader? I mean, you touched on it a little bit, but who's your
Mhm.
ideal reader for the book?
Well, I hate to say, well, everybody, because you're not supposed to say that. So I'll say pretty much marginalized people in marginalized communities who, and anybody who is not able to authentically be who they are in a majority or most of the situations that they find themselves in. And when we're not authentic and when we don't feel like we can be who we are, because I spent a good chunk of my life, and I suspect you probably did too, having people tell you who you were without even understanding anything about you.
Mhm.
So it's more along the lines of first figuring out who you are as a human being, warts and all. Nobody's perfect. So you got that. Once you got that down, then you have to figure out how you're going to manage yourself in situations that are difficult, because usually we have no problem in situations where we're being supported and people are liking what we do and listening to us. And oh, that is so hard sometimes for people to find people who will absolutely listen to what you say without interrupting or dismissing, etc. So, yeah, so finding out who you are and then figuring out how and when to implement that in your own personal life so you can own your power. And I've had really interesting feedback from people who said, I just remembered that phrase from your book and I repeated it. I had a friend who just texted me yesterday She's had some really difficult hip operations, and she was in the laundry room on her walker with her aide. And another woman was leaving the laundry room and looked at her and said, "Well, I got off my walker last week." And my friend, who's very sensitive, took a breath, and then she said, "Well, I'm working my way through my process." So
Hmm.
she said, and I owned my power. So that's kind of what the whole thing boils down to.
Yeah, and it's a really good thing. And I actually, as you were talking about it, it made me think about young people who are kind of just trying to figure out, they're leaving a school setting, they're trying to figure out who they are and how to be authentic in the world. And the reason it came to mind is when you said that, I've probably experienced similar things. For me, a lot of the experience of other people telling me who I was when I was in high school, where I
Uh-huh.
was, not well accepted. I was an odd duck. I was
Hmm.
better friends with the teachers than the students. As a
Hmm.
result, in my class yearbook, I was voted class brown noser. I don't know if every high school has that or not, but that's my epithet in the yearbook. And it really hurt. It
Yeah,
hurt a lot.
yeah.
And that lack of acceptance. And after a while, as I started to embrace who I am authentically and who I want to be in the world, I
Hmm.
realized that the things that I was being picked on for are things that are actually really good qualities about me, because I
Absolutely.
connect one on one with people well. I'm an
Hmm.
introvert. I don't necessarily do well in group settings, except that I've managed to learn how to do well because I speak. As a professional speaker, I have to be in those group settings,
Right.
but it's not my go-to place.
Yeah, exactly.
I do well in one-on-one relationships, and students aren't, high schoolers, there you go in gaggles, it's
Yeah.
like they don't want
Oh,
one-on-one
yeah.
relationships. So that's why I drifted more towards teachers as friends than students. And it was
Hmm.
like I had to learn that just because somebody else thought it was weird or inappropriate or odd didn't mean that it was.
Absolutely. Yeah. In my high school experience, I was not black enough
Okay.
because didn't hang out on the street corners with the kids, and I lived in a I lived sort of higher on the hill, as you say,
Mhm.
and I'm an introvert too, so I totally relate to your experience, but I've heard some of those same things my whole life.
Mm.
So books and writing, great refuge.
Yep. Yep. So, what did you hope to accomplish when you published Bitchcraft?
That's interesting. One thing was absolutely clear to me, and it was like, this is just something I have to do. And it's basically the sort of the same philosophy with yoga is that you take right action, you do the right things for yourself. Your job is to get it out there. Once it's out there, of course, the desire is, oh, New York Times bestseller, sell thousands of copies of books. And I knew that wasn't probably not realistic for me, but it said, all right, I got it out there. So now consciously, I will take whatever steps I can to get as many eyes on the book as possible. That's a lot harder than writing the book and getting it out there. But you just plug along because that's part of the process. It's what you have to do if you want people to read it.
I know you've heard me say this more than once, but I refer to marketing as a journey, not a destination. People seem
Yes.
to think that there's a timeline associated with marketing, that they only have to do it for, the first few weeks or the first couple
Oh,
of
no,
months. And it's like, no, if you want the book
no,
to sell, you have to market. And if you stop marketing,
exactly.
it'll stop selling. And
That's
that's your
right.
choice when
That's
you're ready
right.
to be done marketing it.
That's
But
right.
I certainly think, when you have multiple books like you have, it makes that process a little bit easier, because now you're not just focusing on one potential item that somebody might be interested in for sale.
Hmm.
But if you can't interest in them in one, you might interest them in another. So you have
Exactly.
options.
Exactly. Exactly. And I'm not stopping. Someone asked me the other day, so is this the last book you're going to do? I said, nope, I can't stop. It's a part of a creative lifestyle.
Mhm.
So whether I publish or not, I will always be writing, and we'll see what happens.
Mhm. So how was the book received when it came out?
Well, interesting. I've gotten really great feedback from friends. I've had a couple of friends, well, last week and next week, they've purchased books for their friends, their grandchildren. because we're of a certain age. So when you say grandchildren, they're not little tiny kids, they're adults. And so I'm having lunch with my friends and signing the books for their relatives as gifts. So that's been really, really nice. I've gotten feedback from Facebook friends who say, God, that's a great, great title. I've heard that one a lot. Now,
Mhm.
hopefully they like the title so much they bought the book, but I won't know until the next round of royalties comes out. Then I'll be able to tell.
What surprised you most about the whole process? This is an opportunity to kind of share from your life experience or learned experience for new authors and what they might not be aware of that's ahead of them.
Yeah, I think a lot of because I belong to some writing groups online, and a lot of people say, well, I've got this great novel, and I need to get it out there and I don't know what to do. And so I will always say, well, your choices are self-publishing, hybrid publishing, traditional publishing. Traditional publishing is going to be very difficult unless you're famous or have a huge following. Self-publishing requires a lot of work on your part. Hybrid publishing is a wonderful alternative because you get help along the way, you get advice along the way, and you're going to pay for it. If you self-publish, you're going to pay. If you hybrid publish, you're going to pay. But when you hybrid publish, you get to share the experience and you get a much better return than you would if you traditionally published, if you were fortunate enough. And I've met a couple of folks at book vending places, and someone said, well, I got this book published traditionally, and of course I was like, oh my God, that is so wonderful. And they would say to me, not so much, because they lose control over the cover, over the formatting, and they certainly aren't, if they got an advance at all, it was pretty small, unless you're famous. And in terms of marketing, they still had to do the same amount of marketing that they would do if they had either self-published or hybrid published. So I think it's important for new authors to understand and really do their research on those three options, and then they'll make a better choice to choose what works best for them. But I know what works best for me.
Yeah, I know that was one of the reasons why I started Emerald Lake Books after having self-published 5 books, and with each one ran into a problem that I just didn't know I needed to pay attention to. And my mentor referred to it as unconscious incompetence. I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
And as a result, it was like I really wanted to dig in and figure things out. And I realized that I had the opportunity to help other people
Mm-hmm.
avoid those same mistakes. And that is why I started a hybrid publishing company,
Mm-hmm.
because I liked the idea of partnering with people to help them achieve their dreams and their goals. I didn't have another book in mind at the time that I wanted to sit down and write. And I tend to be the type of writer that um, I write when I'm inspired by a specific and it grabs hold of me and I've got to sit down and get it out before it gets lost. And
Yep.
I'll write and I'll write, I'll set aside 8-hour stretches where I sit down and write, and it's done in a short period of time because I have to get it done. And then I may not write anything for a couple of years. And that's kind of the way things have gone. Um,
See, I'm just the opposite because I'll wake up in the morning and something will pop on something I'm working on. So
mhm,
I would have to say, if I'm not sick or incredibly busy with something else, I pretty much write something every day,
mhm.
whether it's going back and editing something or getting something ready to share with my writers group, or a project that I sort of, and I have like right now 3 or 4 projects, on files that I just kind of go between them. If I
Mhm.
get tired of one, I put it aside, work on something else, and eventually they'll all get done, hopefully. Yeah.
So what's next for you? Are you working on another book or?
Yes. I just finished a debut novel. So I have sent it out to 3 small publishers because I'd just like to see how that might work out. So I've sent it out to, no, I sent it out to 4. I've gotten 1 rejection, and I'm probably going to have to wait until September to see to get the rest of the rejections. I don't worry about rejections. And then I have plan B, which is to either self-publish or contact you. So, and then I have, another nonfiction book called Grit, Grace, and Gratitude, Mindful Musings in the Key of Me. So
Oh,
I'm
that
just
sounds
taking
great.
all my blogs from my website and kind of reworking them a little bit.
Mhm,
And then I have flash fiction. I'm not sure what the title's going to be yet, but there are a lot of these little short stories under 1,500 words, and I'm just going to pack together.
mhm,
And then the characters that were in the novel, I liked them so much that when I wrote the end, I put a question mark after it. So now I'm kind of fitzing around with how to maybe make a novel in stories with those characters. So,
mhm.
like I said, I'm retired and I have to do something with my time because I'm not going to sit in front of the boob tube all day long. So,
Well, that
yeah.
sounds wonderful. I wish you all the best with your writing experiences,
Thanks.
and I hope that each book finds its proper home.
Me too.
I think that's
Thank
one of the
you.
things I always let authors know that, the decision of how to publish really is something that needs to be decided on a book by book basis. It's not even
Yes,
an author by author basis. It's like,
correct.
what are the specific needs of the book and
Mhm.
what will give it the best chance of getting into the hands of readers?
Right.
And so
Exactly.
you have to look at each one carefully and figure out, um, during the Publish with Purpose virtual summit that we hosted for years, one of our speakers at one point in time was Mark Leslie Lefebvre, who is the business development manager for Drafted Digital, but he's also a horror author, and he writes some other books as well. And he talks about how he makes that choice with each book. And for instance, one book he went with a specific publisher because it was haunted places of a specific town, and
Aha.
so he wanted to be able to get the book into the Chamber of Commerce and the gift stores in the town and stuff like that, and even had an app developed so that people could actually get the stories as they went to those different locales in town and things like that. And so he needed to take a very specific publishing path to make sure that the app and the book could integrate properly. And so you
Hmm.
really have to kind of think through what
Yes.
exactly you're trying to do with the book and how
Hmm.
you want to position it so that
Hmm.
it gets the greatest visibility.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, it's
By
always
book.
always an interesting choice.
Hmm. Yeah. Book by book. Like I can't remember the author, but I know the title was Bird by Bird.
Mhm.
Anne Lamott.
Isn't that Anne Lamott? Yeah.
Anne Lamott. Yeah. So you've got book by book. She's got bird by bird, but they both have to help everybody on their writing journey.
Mhm, exactly. So do you
Exactly.
have any, final message that you'd like to share before we wrap things up?
Yeah, I would say that anybody who's looking to publish and decided that a hybrid publishing is the way to go, that I would highly recommend Emerald Lake Books. And when I need to put that in my online posts, I always put in a link to your website.
No, thank you so much. I truly appreciate that.
Welcome.
And it's
No,
always a pleasure working with you. We have a lot of fun going back
yes,
and forth in the editing process and
yes.
discussions of
Lots of stories there. Yeah, for
yes, but
sure.
we have a very good, I think, collaborative relationship,
I do.
which is I
Absolutely,
enjoy.
absolutely, absolutely.
Well, Beth, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. And hopefully, it's an inspiration to other authors who are trying to navigate their next steps. And I hope
Hmm.
people will take an opportunity as well to check out your books.
Me too. Cross fingers.
All right.
Thank
And for
you.
those of you who have been tuning in, thank you so much for your time and your interest. And we look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye.